I'm going to make a bold statement and say that 2019's Modern Warfare will go on to be a hit, both commercially and also with the fans, at least at launch. What might surprise you though is that I'm not basing this hypothesis on the recent alpha or beta. In fact, I think they raised more questions than they answered, and they really didn't give us a complete picture of what the full game will be like. But that's just it, they didn't have to. Call of Duty has become more of an exercise in marketing and positioning at this point than it is about delivering innovative game design. Its central gameplay loop has remained almost unchanged in its 16-year history, and short of pulling a whoopsie on the scale of Battlefront 2, it's almost impossible for Call of Duty to get it wrong when talking purely about gameplay. There's definitely an element of truth to the age-old argument that Call of Duty is simply the same game every year. Call of Duty's gameplay is a known quantity, and for this reason, the success of each new installment isn't determined by new features or how updated the game engine is. Its success depends almost entirely on the marketing and how effective it is at convincing everyone that this year's Call of Duty is different from the last. Okay, I'm aware that a few of you are probably already penning essays refuting the part about gameplay in every Call of Duty being the same. So let me just be clear, this isn't a video about trashing Call of Duty. I'm a big COD fan, maybe not so much of the Black Ops 4s and the Infinite Warfares, but in general, Call of Duty's fast run and gun gameplay is my jam. I like that the core design hasn't changed that much over the years, that's the part I enjoy the most, and I genuinely look forward to seeing how they can mix things up while essentially providing the same experience we know and love. What I do want to discuss in this video is how Call of Duty doesn't need to innovate to be a critical and commercial hit anymore. I believe that its success is almost entirely dependent on the marketing. There's still a lot we don't know about 2019's Modern Warfare, but I believe it's already done enough to win over the vast majority of critics. Anyway, there's a lot to unpack here, so let's get stuck in. Like other long-standing franchises such as FIFA or Final Fantasy, Call of Duty no longer has to sell anyone on its gameplay. The Call of Duty brand has been around for long enough that most people know what to expect from these games. For better or worse, the gameplay has relied on the same formula for well over a decade. And although the setting from title to title is different, at its core it's fundamentally the same game every year. Hell, even your mum knows what Call of Duty is. So if the gameplay is similar from title to title, then the success of each new Call of Duty relies predominantly on the setting, and more importantly, the marketing of this setting. How the intended audience perceives the game to be different, and not how functionally different it actually is what sells copies. Creating this perception in marketing terms is known as positioning. For those unfamiliar with this concept, positioning is a strategy for marketing a product to compete with other similar products. The idea is that if you give your product a unique identity, this will set it apart from the competition. Positioning usually targets a specific demographic such as age, gender, or social status. This makes it more relatable and gives the intended audience a compelling reason to purchase it over something similar. Take Tesla for example. Prior to Tesla's success, electric cars had historically been positioned as environmentally conscious and economical alternatives. This targeted people who believed those to be the most important features in a vehicle. Tesla differentiate themselves by marketing their cars as desirable luxury items, appealing to a completely different group of people despite being a similar product. Nintendo are another good example of this concept in practice. Since the beginning, they've positioned themselves as fun, wholesome entertainment for everyone. They make consoles and games just like Sony or Microsoft do, but they specifically position their products as accessible fun for casuals and families. You can still play Doom on the Switch of course, but the message that Nintendo's marketing constantly sends is this, and not this. One of Call of Duty's biggest competitors is itself. With a new game out each year and gameplay remaining similar from title to title, convincing people to upgrade to the new one isn't an easy task. The challenge for both the development and marketing teams is creating an experience that feels familiar, but at the same time unlike anything else. Call of Duty positions itself as an arcadey Michael Bay style experience, but beyond this, each new game has to carve out its own identity to set itself apart from the previous installments. This year's Modern Warfare has positioned itself as a return to the golden era of Call of Duty. It taps into the nostalgia of some of the most iconic and influential games in the franchise, while also distancing itself from the games that came immediately before it. The most obvious example of this positioning is in the reuse of the Modern Warfare title, but everything about Modern Warfare's design indicates a desire to be seen differently to the most recent games. From the return to a modern military setting and old-school boots-on-the-ground gameplay to cross-play across all platforms and doing away with the unpopular Season Pass. Call of Duty's setting is an integral part of its success. So much so that gameplay innovation doesn't really matter that much anymore, because this isn't the area that people expect to see huge changes. Now that doesn't mean that gameplay isn't important, it simply means that each new title only needs to achieve the status quo in this area. It doesn't need to reinvent the wheel, it simply needs to deliver what people expect and not much more. Infinite Warfare is a perfect example of this. As far as Call of Duty games go, it bombed. Not because it didn't have Call of Duty's signature gunplay or good graphics, and not because it was riddled with bugs. It failed because at that point in time, the vast majority of players weren't excited to play another Call of Duty set in the future. It bombed the second that infamous first trailer dropped, before anyone had seen the gameplay, let alone experienced it for themselves. Whatever new ideas it brought to the table were overlooked because cosmetically it appeared to be giving us more of the same. Its setting and the marketing failed to resonate with the intended audience, and this is something that Activision themselves have admitted to. Modern Warfare, on the other hand, has been the other way around. It won over the vast majority of critics as soon as the reveal trailer launched, so all that the alpha and beta needed to do was deliver what the trailer promised. And did they do that? For the most part, yeah. Activision has been using betas for a while now to get people to try the latest game when they otherwise might not. These tests are less about putting the game through its paces and more about promoting it to as many people as possible. They're positioned as big, exciting events and act as the first point of sale, providing incentive to pre-order the game for early access. They know that if they can get people to play it and experience its various addictive systems and gameplay loops, there's a good chance of them becoming hooked. Once a player reaches this point, the setting and visuals won't matter as much, because these carefully crafted systems is what will keep people coming back. I mentioned in my video on designing addiction how Call of Duty has perfected the use of many psychological techniques to keep you coming back to the game, such as positive reinforcement. The studios behind these games have deliberately designed them to be addictive, knowing that once you've had a taste, there's a very good chance that you'll come back for more. Giving people the chance to play for free also allows them to become emotionally invested. There's a psychological principle known as loss aversion, whereby people see greater value in the things they already have versus acquiring something new. If you apply this principle to games, and specifically limited time trials, people start to become invested in the experience after spending time with it, particularly if they engage in activities like personalizing their avatars and customizing their loadouts, which Call of Duty has an abundance of. When this is taken away, the desire not to lose the invested time, effort, and emotional attachment to the things they've created can be a strong motivator to spend money. Limited time demos such as betas also tap into people's fear of missing out. If they see all their favorite YouTubers, streamers, and friends playing, then the desire to do what everyone else is doing can be enough to convince people to play something they might not have any interest in otherwise. Additionally, betas let publishers curate how people experience the game, letting them play the parts they know players will enjoy, while obfuscating potentially contentious elements such as microtransactions. Both the alpha and beta were narrow in scope. The beta was far more representative of the final product, but while it did give us a glimpse at the core multiplayer experience, it left enough unanswered questions that anyone still on the fence has a reason to check out the final product. So the alpha and beta accomplished exactly what they needed to. They provided just enough to get a taste and experience the parts of the game the developers knew would be received well. Undoubtedly, Infinity Ward were also able to stress test their servers and gather other valuable data too, but most importantly, these tests helped continue build hype in the lead up to the game's launch. This strategy seems to have worked perfectly too. Loads of popular YouTubers and streamers have covered the game in a positive light, including plenty of OG members of the Call of Duty community.
I really like it. The guns are brilliant and they feel as though they've got weight to them.
It still felt like Call of Duty with improved mechanics that appeal to me as a gamer and great visuals and great gun crafting.
Then this alpha came around and I ended up having a really fucking good time the whole weekend. And I didn't even love the concept of a 2v2 gunfight.
Because this kind of relaunches Call of Duty again. Honestly, we thought it was just going down all the way to the grave, and this gives huge hope.
If the goal of Modern Warfare's positioning was to win back the original fanbase, then it really couldn't have gone better from a marketing point of view. When you strip out the visuals and the audio design, Modern Warfare is not that different from the previous games. At its core, it's still a typical Call of Duty, with fast-paced action, tons of customization options, a deep progression system, and of course, kill streaks. And this is what Call of Duty is to most people. You could argue that the pacing in Modern Warfare is slower, or that the weapon attachment system is radically different, but most people outside of the dedicated fanbase couldn't tell you how this affects the meta, or even if it's significantly different from any of the other games. What matters to the mainstream, and ultimately to Activision's bottom line, is that Call of Duty appears to be doing something new, that the latest game is taking the franchise in a bold new direction, and giving players something that they haven't had before. Whether it's actually doing this or not doesn't matter, because the setting and the marketing can create the perception that it is. I'd love to get your take on this hypothesis though. I know that for a lot of hardcore Call of Duty fans, the gameplay is the most important part. I personally know people who couldn't care less if the game was set during the Vietnam War or feudal Japan. It's the moment-to-moment combat that sells them on the latest game, and features such as wall running or boots on the ground can be make or break. Anyway, drop your thoughts below, and if you liked or disliked this video, be sure to smash the relevant thumbs up or thumbs down button. Subscribe if you're new, but otherwise, cheers!